I was a drunk, narcissistic, belligerent asshole who really ruined damn near everything in my life. Monday morning, I woke up and I said, I'm driving across the country to hug a redwood tree. I was pushing 50 hits going into that last session, which is definitely not what I would recommend for most people. But like I said, I really had nothing to lose at that point.
With me today is Adam Butler. Thanks for being here, Adam. It's good to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure. Really excited to see how you take this conversation.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a little different from other conversations. How about you just share what initially drew you into exploring consciousness? And I'm interested particularly in how that journey eventually led you to DMT research, and then we can talk about Monroe Institute and your experiences there.
I think the best way to give the proper context is really my life kind of before psychedelics and DMT and after, because they're really two completely different stories. And uh, I guess why I'm doing podcasts and ultimately why I'm sitting in front of you is because all of my experiences culminated in me publishing a book about DMT and about my experiences with the desire to, to help people not so much not go through what I've been through because like a lot of your guests share, you kind of have to walk through some dark areas to really appreciate the light. But it was more just take some of the taboo out of the conversation about psychedelics, especially DMT, and just add more than just trip reports or more than just academic research, which both are important. But I figured that I could add my experience to it. And I guess if I could, this is something that hopefully that I can offer to the space too, is that psychedelics and their application to mental health and therapeutic values is really, really popular. And I'll be the first to admit that it did really transform my life and it did save me. But, um, psychedelics are not for everybody. DMT is definitely not for everybody. There are, they're powerful molecules that really, if you don't have the proper respect and reverence, can really do some damage. So it's not something that's just gonna, this cure all. And I do also think that there are many other keys to kind of unlock the human potential or to kind of unlock the joy, contentment, the connection, all of the beautiful experiences that I love sharing. There are many other ways of tapping into that. So, it's not do DMT, share it just like I did, and everybody should go on an ayahuasca retreat or, smoke a bunch of DMT. What I am saying though is that everybody should do what I did, and it seems to be part of everybody else's story, is take the time to know yourself, to learn about yourself, and to ultimately love yourself, and to know that you're worthy of taking the time to do that. So, long kind of disclaimer, but my life at 41 years old, so I'm 45 now. I'm 5 years coming up on being sober from alcohol, so that's also a big part of my story. But at 41 years old, I had that proverbial midlife crisis where a culmination of a bunch of things happened in my life where everything blew up, everything was destroyed. And in hindsight, I can say it was all of my own making. I was a drunk, narcissistic, belligerent asshole who really ruined damn near everything in my life. And I lost multiple relationships. I lost multiple high-paying jobs. Um, and really the real final kind of FU was a guy that I had worked with screwed me over some money, and I threatened to kill him. And I don't say that lightly. And I was in a really, really dark, suicidal place. And I know that's a term that we have to be careful using, but the truth is, I really was, after years of all these things happening, I had to take a hard look at myself. And that morning, so that confrontation happened on a Sunday night. And Monday morning, I woke up and I said, I'm driving across the country to hug a redwood tree. And basically, I took like a year and a half off to travel the country, kind of have this spiritual journey and do quite a bit of psilocybin shrooms as well as DMT, and throughout that process, come back and kind of share my story. But there's a lot of details that to pick apart. I'll be happy to go down any of them. But honestly, it was just me being an asshole, treating people like shit, and it all came back and landed on me where I had to sit at myself and look in the mirror and say, "What the hell is happening?"
So, what I mean, you would have had different options at that point when you realized, okay, I've got to do something here. What made you decide, okay, I'm just going to take off for a year, and what led you down that road?
So before taking off, I had already started exploring with psychedelics. So I guess that that final snap, the bullet points that led up to that were I was in a long-term relationship where everything on paper was perfect. I had the high-paying job. I was also investing in real estate, so I had multiple properties. We had this beautiful three-story Victorian by the house, excuse me, by the ocean, and I got a knock on the door from a constable, and it was a restraining order. And it was just an immediate, everything in my life was just shaken, where it was like, all right, so end of relationship, end of my house, everything I invested in it, um, end of where I was running my business. But that's when I was still drinking, and I was still really kind of blaming other people for my issues. But had a reset, kind of moved back in with my parents, got another relationship. I was in another relationship that also ended horribly within a short amount of time. I quit my high paying job and got another even better high paying job, and that's the one that ended shortly thereafter with that threatening confrontation. Um, and so all of these things had happened where I had rebuilt my life and then it failed, rebuilt, it failed, rebuilt, it failed. And part of my story, and I share it because this isn't a woe is me, Adam Butler story. I had every advantage growing up possible. I was the rich white kid from New England that went to college. I had great parents, awesome grandparents. I was gifted a significant amount of money to start businesses. I had everything. But that was kind of the point of why I wanted to share my story too, where it's like if I had a hard time figuring out what my path was or how to stop banging my head against the wall, how difficult is it for all these other people that don't necessarily have the same advantages or the stuff that happened to them, the trauma, the pain, all of that wasn't self-induced like me, and it was just I couldn't imagine. I really felt the pain of what other people potentially had gone through. But what led me to that point was two failed relationships, two jobs. Now that I knew that so my second high paying job was now gone because this guy was co-owner of that company. But he also lived about a block and a half from me. And he was a young guy that, um, he was a husband, he had a kid, and both of us were pretty hotheads. And I knew it wasn't just gonna resolve that night. And luckily at that point I had enough money in my bank account and I really had lost everything. So I just said, screw it, I'm done, I'm out. And I just hopped in my car and left with a backpack and really no plan. And uh, that I know how fortunate I am to do that. Most people, that's kind of their lifelong dream. Where I traveled across like 40 states. I went to all the national parks. I lived on beaches, lived out in the woods. Really, my biggest issue once I kind of get through the mental bullshit was where to have coffee and where to have ice cream. But I say that, and I say that with a smile and saying, yes, I'm writing this book about all this fantastic stuff. But it's because I went through the the pain, the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal ideation, and that the really um, long, hard look at myself, deciding do I want to walk off into the woods and not come back, and that's what led me to psychedelics. Was I'd been hearing a lot about the therapeutic value of shrooms with veterans or with people that had gone through trauma, and I wasn't really interested in pharmaceutical drugs. I wasn't interested in doing anything hard, what I considered what was hard drugs. So I was comfortable exploring shrooms. I figured they were organic, they were natural. It was something I could kind of slowly get into, and there was a lot of literature about shrooms. So um, I started that journey into psychedelics, getting into shrooms, and had amazing therapeutic value, and was really able to peel back a lot of layers of my psyche and expose a lot of the crap that I needed exposing. But I didn't have that breakthrough epiphany. That's when I did, and I can get into that story about how DMT kind of fell into my lap. But I did have access to it, and after doing the research and feeling comfortable that I could and should explore it, I did. Um, and so after having those two kind of clarity things happen with me and shake up some of the plaque that was embedded when that conflict with that guy happened, it was I had nothing else. I had no relationship, no job now, no money. And the other part of where I was living was the other co-owner's house. So I knew I really didn't have a place to live either. So after rebuilding my life multiple times over in my 40s, here I was again, sitting there pretty much with nothing. And it was more because I was scared and had no choice why I took off, to be all honest. But it was the best thing I ever did. And that first day I drove 26 hours straight and made it from Rhode Island to Kansas City, Missouri. And from there, that was kind of the beginning of it all.
Okay, so walk
A
us,
lot there.
because a lot of people watching it really aren't gonna understand what DMT is, and for anyone out there, this isn't a recommendation of anything to do anything. So we're just talking about
Mhm.
our experiences here. So walk us through how, yeah, when you selected DMT, did you work with somebody who was experienced with that, or is it just something a journey that you took on for yourself? And what was that like? Like the first sort of major breakthrough experience, if we could call it that.
Sure. So, I did not find DMT. DMT found me, and that kind of seems to be the common story between me and whether it be the Monroe Institute, whether it be DMT, whether it be like it when you need it, it seems to kind of fall into your lap. But when I was doing the research into psychedelics and shrooms, DMT was also part of that conversation. So this was, several years ago. It had been popularized by the movie called The Spirit Molecule, which was based off a book called The Spirit Molecule by Dr. Rick Strassman. That
Yep,
would
I've
probably
read
be
that one.
so anybody interested in DMT, I would start with that just because it's a great breakdown of what the molecule is, where it's derived from, how it interacts physiologically with the human body. But and then just podcasts like, common ones like Joe Rogan, and there were some comedians out there that were talking about it. And I was interested because it seemed like it was this kind of life-shattering shakeup where people were having these epiphanies that them describing it seemed to be exactly what I needed. And when people were describing, what mushrooms could do, it was a lot of inner work. It was that shadow work. It was that going into, like you said, peeling back the layers of yourself. And I got that part of it, but I needed, I needed something else. And um, again, I was comfortable meditating. I was comfortable, kind of exploring tantric practices or lucid dreaming practices, and I felt as though the answer was kind of, how do I untether my consciousness, or how do I somehow clear this plaque up? And that's an analogy that I use quite often, is that I think society just builds up so much plaque on people and so much societal bullshit and social media smut and expectations and self limitations and sometimes actual trauma and real stuff. But I was just so bogged down with all the crap in my life, and then the clarity that I had from the shrooms was like, wow, all of this crap was to my own making, and it was because I was the asshole. And I like, these were beautiful women that did nothing wrong but try to love me. These were guys that did nothing but all I had to do was have a conversation with. um and it, I had all of this, you know, uh, the shrooms really shined a spotlight on all the crap that was wrong in my life. And now I felt as though DMT potentially could be the thing that could help me kind of shake up that plaque and maybe have a different way of thinking. So, I guess how it found me was I had a very, and do have a very close friend who I consider a brother, who knew the troubles that I was going through, knew the dark places that I was, exploring. And he said that he had access to it, and well, that he had some, and that he would happily give it to me. Knowing that this would probably help me, or that it had the potential to help me. And the fact that I had already been comfortable exploring the psychedelic space, being in shrooms, and shrooms and DMT have a lot of differences, but I felt kind of having that separation of my normal five senses from my body was something that I had become comfortable with during shrooms. So I figured it was at least a foundation that I could explore DMT, I thought, safely. So, I spent quite a bit of time reading the books, watching the podcast, getting the information that I thought I needed, and then set aside that day that I say really, kind of saved and changed my life, which was that day that I first sat down with DMT and really had some really deep, deep sessions and blasted, several times. And I guess for people that don't know DMT, most psychedelics, um, shrooms last 6, 7, 8 hours. LSD can be 12 hours or more. A strong ayahuasca session can be 18 hours, or, definitely 10 plus hours. Where if you're smoking DMT, which is what I'm talking about, the sensation only lasts 7, 8 minutes. And it's a really deep, deep kind of exploration of your consciousness. But because it is natural, because it is endogenous, which is something we can get into, meaning that it is naturally produced in your own body, you metabolize it very, very quickly, and you metabolize it where there's no lingering effect, there's no hangover, there's no really you blast off, and then you come back to full clarity and full lucidity, and you're able to kind of integrate what you've learned in this really deep psychedelic space. But when I say I did several sessions that day, it's because of the short duration of DMT, which in my opinion makes it a really valuable tool if somebody is looking to explore psychedelics. So yeah, I can get into that first day, but different from, and like I said, I listened to several of your podcast guests. Jerry Sargent was talking about how he went down to and did some ayahuasca retreats, and he was sitting in the bathroom and mosquitoes were biting his ankles, and he just kind of had to grin and bear it and go through it. And it's like I can't imagine being in the jungle with mosquitoes, trying to go to the bathroom in a dirty bat, like just all of that, and then lasting that long. And I've done ayahuasca, and it is beneficial, and I think it does have certainly a place. But I think the being able to be in the comfort of your own bed, in the sheets, with a pillow, with a bottle of water, with something that only lasts several minutes, and you can still kind of see beyond the veil, is something that's helpful for a large, part of the population. If again, psychedelics are calling to you.
Yeah, Jerry's a warrior, so it's hard to kind of say. I think for anyone to look at him and go, "Oh, yeah, I could do what Jerry's saying." He's
Yeah,
like
he's a.
one of a kind, a beast in a way. All right, well,
But you
how
notice how
about you?
that beast
Go on.
ended his story with love and light and connection, and I just want to save the world and help everybody. And ultimately, that's my message. And even he, I think, prefaces it with, it's corny, and it kind of sounds weird, especially these, you know, tattooed, like, you know, kind of rough looking dudes talking about these
Mm,
experiences that changed him to empathy and sympathy and love and light. And but it's true, and that's part of the similar story. But as much as there's a place for ayahuasca retreats and ibogaine done in medical settings, and people holding space for shroom ceremonies, DMT also has that space where it can be something that can be used kind of in a more not comfortable setting, but in a more personal setting, because it doesn't have to be out in some space or in some weird country, or it really can just be a matter of wherever you feel comfortable.
mm.
Which
All right,
I,
walk us through. Walk
I
us through
guess yeah. So
what your experience is like in as much detail as you're happy to share.
I think there are a couple important bullet points. So I said multiple sessions. So that first session stood out where the first hit I took, so instantly your senses start going wild. So you have the spinning mandalas, and the vibratory hum in your ears are instant, and you kind of get this visceral hum that starts going through your body. But more than the physical response, the first thing that actually came to my mind was, this is normal, this is innate. It's something that I felt as though I felt before at a prior time in my life, and there was this very kind of familiar, distinct nasal cavity sensation where I felt something dripping in the back of my throat that obviously had to do with some of what I had just smoked. But it reminded me of being in my youth and my adolescent multiple times where I remembered that sensation and that feeling. And different from shrooms, where you can kind of feel the poison setting in. Like once you've done 3 or 4 grams of shrooms, you've got to kind of sit back and just kind of wait for your body to lose full control over its senses, and then you start seeing all these weird things happening. And like I said, all the sights and sounds are manipulated. With DMT, it wasn't like a poisoning or your sensations were getting dulled or lesser than. It really was like the veil's removed. This is how your human body really should vibrate. These are your normal five senses, where they're normally at a level of 10, are now dialed up incredible. But then now you have all these other sensory abilities, and that was the first kind of initial shock, was like, oh shit, this is not scary. As much as it's profound and mind blowing, and nothing you've ever experienced, it is familiar. It is maybe something that you've experienced with the endogenous pulses that you've had, but the lack of fear and the comfort level, and the fact that my body did not feel like I was having a poison going into me, was very comforting. But it wasn't, I wasn't there to have a sights and sound show. I wasn't there just for the fancy artwork that I had seen in these movies and to see cool shit. Like I was there because I was literally ready to end my life, and I I needed help and I needed answers and I needed more. And that first session, I didn't get any epiphanies. I didn't get any interactions with entities. There were no downloads. There was no, there was nothing that happened other than just, wow, this is kind of exciting. So again, it only lasted a few minutes. So I waited a couple minutes after coming back. I pushed it further. And typically a normal dose is 3 or 4 hits. If you can push it to 5 hits or more, you can, kind of reach those levels. But honestly, the same thing that second session and the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth was just, okay, this isn't scary. My body feels comfortable. I'm seeing all these weird things. My body is vibrating and humming at this incredible pace and at this weird tonality. I'm having like geometric shapes that are way beyond my mental capacity to create. And that's one thing that we can kind of get into too, is that is as educated as my brain is, or as all the things that I've studied, or all the art, or all the books that I've read, there's no way that I could create the complexity of what was going on with just your typical senses. But again, no no epiphany, no help. So this was now an hour or so into it, and I go over more of the details in my book about how I was pushing 50 hits going into that last session, which is definitely not what I would recommend for most people. But I would, like I said, I really had nothing to lose at that point. And the last session is when and I want to preface, every session should have an intention and should be with a kind of a plan, and why are you doing it? And all of my prior sessions were with the same intention of, I need help, I need clarity, and any way that you can, whatever, show me some way or show me some light. I'm down for it. But that last session, I really pleaded, and I was with tears in my eyes, saying, like, please, like, I don't want to have this be my last day, and I need something. I need something. And that last session was when everything was completely different from all the other ones. There was no vibratory hum. There was no fancy sights of sounds. There was no spinning mandalas. There was nothing but just quiet darkness, and there was no, like, felt like I was falling. There was no ascending through any portals. At this particular time, it was just a quiet nothingness. And that's when I did get my first conveyance of information. And this also wasn't an entity interaction. And this wasn't, um, what a lot of people talk about when they talk about these DMT entities. This really was just a conveyance of information. And some people try to describe it as a download, as a DNA upgrade, as a something, but it was an instantaneous conveyance of knowledge that I didn't have to try to understand conceptually. It was just an innate knowing. And in my case, um, and I mentioned some of the details. Really, it was just, I had all this chatter from my past, and all this, like, how could this possibly happen? And then all these unknowns in the future that were all going on, and my brain really couldn't just be anything but anxious or stressed or pissed off, because it was just constantly going back from the past and the future. And in that state, all of those proverbial dots in my life were connected in a way that made me feel comfortable that I could stop chasing the past or the future, and I could just really be comfortable in this space, in this here now. And all of my issues, or all of the things I was thinking about, got connected, and then those blew up, and then like a million came, and then those got connected, and then those blew up. And the sum of that, and again, it sounds corny to say some of these, like the sums of it, but it really was, all we have is this second. All we have is this millisecond, this right here, this right now. And that's what we have control over. So if the shrooms shined a spotlight on all the crap that I did wrong, and all the things that I did that were evil and bad and treated people like shit, and I've got alcohol out of my system, and now, like, all right, I've got a new path that I need to figure out. DMT finally allowed me to be like, all right, well, you still have all these skill sets, you still have all these capabilities. It blasted all that plaque away, so then I could start connecting with, and this is a common thing which a lot of your again, guests talk about. Once that plaque was removed and that perception kind of shift was happened, I was allowed to connect with source, or connection, or God, or however people want to try to word it. I was able to reconnect with a higher energy of power that then allowed me to stop banging my head against the wall, to feel comfortable in my own skin, and to finally start rebuilding my life. And that feeling hasn't left since that day. And that doesn't mean I don't have shitty days or I don't get angry or things don't go wrong. It's just my body is completely wired in a different way, and I'm I approach, how I interact with people, adversity, things, everything, good and bad, in a completely different way. And that ultimately, I guess, is what I learned is from being a pent up, stressed, narcissistic, alcoholic asshole that everybody, you know, everybody every day, all day pissed me off and I was angry and including at myself worse because I was hiding all of this crap to being happy, content, joyful, connected, calm, um, mentally, spiritually, and physically just healthy. All of those things were complete opposite of what I used to be. And ultimately, that's the message that I want to share. And now that I've been sharing that message, I've personally experienced and have talked to many other people that, again, there's other ways of obtaining this clarity. So I don't, again, the answer isn't everybody go out and do 50 hits of DMT or 8 grams of shrooms or think they have to go to Monroe or have to go to any of these places. It's it's going to be different for everybody, but the point is, and I think maybe a lot of your viewers and why they're attracted to a show like yours is not every shit's not going right, or there's some things that are wrong, or they have some unanswered questions, or they realize something about their life isn't quite aligned, and they know that, and they're getting these signals and stressors every day, all day, and like most people in society, they just sweep them under the rug. They mask them with alcohol or prescription pills, and don't really like face not only the shit they need to fix, but then also um, appreciate the stuff that they should be doing. And I think the common thread through a lot of people that I've befriended, and again, a lot of your guests, is that they've somehow figured that out, is that they're not part of the bullshit anymore. And they've kind of take sovereignty over their own mind and their own well-being. And whether through a death experience, an astral projection, or a DMT blast, I think we're all kind of experiencing a similar thing. Or I know you want to get into Monroe, or experiencing Monroe technology. And in essence, they're doing and utilizing the same things that I think we're all talking about, which is energy, vibration, and conveyance of information at increased and different levels of vibratory hums. And DMT is a way to do that. Monroe technology is a way to do that. Lucid dreaming is a way to do that. Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing is that I think we often, okay, so for me, when we're stressed or angry about things or um, frustrated, etc., I think we can get ourselves into a state where although those, I think you've got to, if you have those feelings, you've got to experience them and allow them to sort of pass through you. But I think they come from not really being confident that things will work out or the answers will come. And it sounds to me like you kind of got to a point where you you had this sort of confidence almost imbued upon you that whatever you needed to learn or know, you had some knowing that came in, but there was also this other thing where it didn't matter what was going to happen. You could work it out. There was no longer, you get where I'm going there. It's something changed, something shifted where you thought, okay, this connection that you have with source, that's just going to, as long as that's there, you can work things out. You can, and you don't need to be stressed and frustrated. You can just relax and just allow things to come. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I removed the conflict. I removed the self-imposed roadblocks. I removed the untrue limitations and I exposed the real limitations and then I worked on them. But I think a big or a common story that you hear a lot of people talk about when they experience psychedelics is the idea of confronting their ego or and I don't use it, but people talk about like dissolving their ego. I don't think the purpose, and I certainly didn't dissolve my ego. If anything, I amplified aspects of my ego. But that was part of that inner shadow work, that shroom work at the beginning of it, which was and I'm a big fan of Carl Jung and his philosophy and how he peels back the subconscious layers of individuals as well as the kind of collective whole and the really importance of doing that inner shadow work. And that just means, the aspects of yourself that you aren't all that proud of. Or, I say often that it was so easy for me to lie to my friends, my family. I was paying a therapist, but you can't lie to yourself when you're staring in the mirror on 5 grams of shrooms. Like you like the clarity is there. And part of when I was going through months of that shroom work was all of those voices in my head that said, "Oh, threaten to kill that guy," or scream and get drunk, or do all of the shitty things that I used to do. Um, those voices, they're just like the little kid in the corner of the room screaming, and it's not necessarily "shut up, don't say what you need to say," or "why are you saying that," or "you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong." All of these aspects of yourself, I think, have a purpose and they have their own voice. I was just letting certain aspects of my individual psyche rule me and run me and kind of run the big atom, the collective me as a whole. And it was only until that I was able to shine a spotlight on those areas of myself, but then confront them, name them, befriend them. It wasn't kill them, dissolve them, and get them out of me, and then I never want to hear from you again. It's no, listen. All right, I'll give you a seat at the table. I'll let you state your piece. And when I have a flush of anger, yeah, I can still have those thoughts. Or if I have, a flush of jealousy, or I'm certainly not some enlightened soul that just has no negative things go through. It's more just they're filtered through the proper lens of, oh, this is the hurt part of Adam that must be feeling this, or this is the insecure part, but well, this is why, because you've already explored all these reasons, as opposed to just kind of automatically responding in an external way that somehow is going to have a negative cascade effect. It's almost instantly internalized in a way that you can just process it in a way that's not limiting. And that doesn't mean, that you kind of just succumb and surrender and that you're just placid and you don't have any desires or you don't go through your goals. It's almost just the opposite. Like I'm more passionate and more driven and more inspired. But like you said, you get into this flow state where it's you just kind of become and you're able to connect and everything just becomes easier. So if it's a calm conversation with your spouse around the dinner table because you're not stressed out, it just becomes that much easier. Or, if it's dealing with your coworkers, or if it's, all of these aspects of yourself, you're able to just process it in a way um, that isn't tainted by shit that's just gonna negatively impose you. So, um, and there is that. Not, it seems to be a very common trait for the people that have kind of explored those aspects of their ego, because there is a humility, there is a kind of reckoning with the ego, and you can kind of come out of it on the other side where it's not only is there less internal conflict, and I guess a nice way of kind of wrapping that whole thing up is that once you become really comfortable being in your own skin and being comfortable kind of processing the world through your own lens and understanding it, putting in that perspective, it becomes very easy to convey that to other people. So you're not trying to convey people to this or try to have people think the same way as you. It becomes easy to have people that have difference of opinions, whether it be political or about sexual stuff or about, all spectrums of what is society's battling right now. It becomes way easier just to give other people the space to be like, oh yeah, well, if I'm entitled to this and I'm entitled to my own thoughts and I'm entitled to have um, information come to me in this way, so is everybody else. And that that's kind of, I think, where that common kumbaya love and empathy and we're all one mentality comes in, because it just becomes very easy and self-serving because you look at everybody as your ally, not as your enemy, and you realize that there's plenty of resources here to go around and we don't have to hoard them. You realize that difference of opinion can actually be a positive data point to your life. And a big part of my story too is I mentioned how I had multiple horrible breakups, and I do want to preface this when I say I get a restraining order, not that um, emotional or verbal abuse is any better, but I just want to say I've never hit anybody. I've never been in a fight in my entire life, so it's not like I was abusing women. I was just physically and verbally just a nasty person, and that's where that restraining order kind of came in and blasted it out. But um, fuck, I got sidetracked with that. Oh, it was the multiple breakups. So I had three long-term relationships that ended horribly, and it was really because I had no idea on how to accept and appreciate the feminine attributes and aspects in general, like these big archetypal concepts of what feminine energy is. But let alone that I was able to embrace it in myself and understand it in myself. And again, kind of some of the things pulled in from other people when they talk about like Kundalini awakening and this energy happening. there's this kind of yin and yang that has to happen in the swirling flow. And all of that kind of did happen in my psychedelic states, where it put all of my interactions with females in my past and now, my current, in a completely different way, where I'm able to step back and see how horribly wrong I interact with them, and how just I wasn't aware, where it was almost like anything they did different, it was like, how could you not be the same 40-year-old male? And it's like, well, because you're, a beautiful young woman who has so many other different things, but it's almost like I was trying to get them to be exact mirror and replicas of me. And if they put the milk in a different place, or if they cleaned something different, or if they did, all the little things that would irk me because they were different, now I look at all of those things like beautiful blessings. And I'm so lucky to have my mom, my sister, my nieces, my girlfriend, and including those feminine, nurturing aspects of myself, where it's all part of this massive mirror that gets held up against to you, that psychedelics and or inner work allow. That, in my opinion, if anybody else tells you, and not just me, I think most people, they're gonna have a negative response to it. And the message kind of needs to come from within. And as much as all these concepts, we can talk about Monroe, we can talk about astral projecting, we can talk about psychedelics, it has to be experiential. People can't just read about something, or they have to feel it, they have to believe it, they have to really go through that experience. And I think once you go through any one of these number of experiences, you kind of become aware of our full potential, and then what it's like to kind of be in that light instead of the dark, and to be vibrating at or near full potential instead of just bogged down by shit.
Yeah, the first-hand experience, I don't think there's anything that can replace that. You can go with what I heard somebody use the term Instabro. You could go with what an Instabro said, or you could also have your own personal experience. And it's one of the things I love about Tom Campbell, who wrote the My Big Toe books. He always, and still does, always talks about, well, this was my personal experience. So everything I talk about is because I experienced it personally, whether it's, the out of body states and knowledge you gain, who he spoke to. I just heard him yesterday talking about how he accompanied people who died, and because somebody asked, well, what happens when you die? He goes, well, this is my personal experience. I actually accompanied
Hmm.
over a period of time, people as they're dying, and this is what I witnessed. Now, whether everyone would witness the same thing, it's hard to say, but that was his personal experience. And that is what makes it, to me, it gives it so much more weight. And I think anybody who, wants to experience anything like what we're talking about, it's definitely the road is your own personal road to see actually what happens. So
But it's nice if I could
yeah,
talk about him. Like,
sure.
so he's rubbed shoulders with Rob Monroe in his own right, like, an accomplished developer, researcher. I just want to say it's more than just people. You had on your show that Harvard doctor who had a near-death experience and completely changed his whole perspective.
Yeah, the brain surgeon whose
Right,
name escapes me at the moment, but I know that one you
even
meant.
I
Yeah.
believe. But
Yes,
I
even
guess
Alexander.
what I'm saying is that it's more than just necessarily bearded, tattooed guys like look like me that are saying, well, listen, I went off into this DMT space and I interacted with these sentient beings that downloaded information, and now I'm a changed guy. That's that's a weird bullet point of what, but there's so many, there's physicists, there's doctors, there's people that are all spectrums that are well educated, can speak better than I about different aspects of this, that are all kind of coming back to the same thing. So when you talk about Tom Campbell, I really appreciate how he describes things, because yes, he's saying it's my own experience, but his experiences are phenomenal. And he's his stories are very um similar to what other people are experiencing and kind of saying. And that's why, if any one of these people, including myself's kind of story, is true or has even a bit of reality to it, that means there's so much more. And I think there's hundreds of thousands of data points from thousands of credible people that have had experiences that go beyond our five human senses, which imply an untethered consciousness or some way of altering or expanding our consciousness. And there's a lot of information there to be gained. Now, for somebody like myself that was in a dark place that needed information on how to be happy again and want to live, that information was there for me. But I think there's a lot there too. Like, how can we get to the next step of human evolution? What are some of the major questions in science or in medicine or in quantum physics? Like what other information can come on these elevated states of vibration to be received by a lot of us that can actually make some significant changes? And that's what I'm interested in exploring. DMT psychedelics are not. Actually, I just booked a 5-day darkness retreat coming up in a couple months. So it's literally just going to sit in a dark room in complete silence with no light at all for over 4 nights and 4 days. What's going to come of that? I have no idea, but I know it'll be a pretty good test for my consciousness. And that's the type of stuff that I'm interested in doing because I don't know, again, you take time for yourself to know yourself. And typically when that happens, you learn how to love yourself. And that's kind of the end point of all of this. And not in some, again, from coming from a narcissistic person that used to try to get and manipulate and control people. This is a love yourself in a completely giving, altruistic, resonate to vibrate with like energies and create beautiful things, not in some manipulative way. And it's a better way to live. And it's, I don't actually, I do know because I've talked to quite a few people. You're in Australia, correct?
Yep.
So, mental health and especially, middle-aged men that look like me, men working, in these tough blue-collar industries. I know that mental health is a big issue in your country, just like it is here. And, there's a way out of that rat race. There's a way out of that. If every day you're waking up and you're miserable and you feel like there's any reason to be here, um, there's so many reasons to be here, and the beautiful thing is that it's going to be subjective and unique to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be psychedelics in Monroe and all of the things that I'm doing. It could be yoga and cold plunges and breathing meditations, and you start whatever, a knitting company to donate mittens. Like, I mean, it's this whatever you're called to, that's what's going to make you feel good. But I think so many people in society are just not doing what they're called to, knowing that you have to still pay the bills, and that's that kind of. Now, how do you come back from the proverbial mountaintop with all this enlightened information and then still fit into society and not whatever that everybody thinks you're crazy?
Yeah, I think you've got to. I know one of the things as I've gotten older is doing things that is just for me and being okay with that as well, and that it actually benefits everybody. So, like, I recently started just going there's a recovery center where they have infrared saunas, right? Which I'd always be interested in going, like the health benefits of going to a sauna, but it's actually ended up being a lot more than that. And sometimes it does get in the way of things, like, well, not get in the way, but sometimes, like there's something to do with the kids or whatever. And that is my time. I've got that carved out and I go there twice a week. It's for half an hour. I just sit still. Like half an hour goes really quick. Yes, there are health benefits, but what I've realized is that it's actually just time that I made for myself,
Hmm.
unapologetically. And it's really important. That kind of sticks in there. Going to the gym with my friend 2 days a week is another one. It's like it's really everything. It comes before everything else. And I think it's not about being selfish. It's like you just got to take time to do things to nurture your own self, and then you end up being a much better human being. I think, and you just feel
Perfect.
much better as well. You end up doing everything for everyone else, as noble as that might sound. I think it just ends up backfiring
Yeah.
and being
And
worse.
and for me, it was so easy to see, um, because everything, all of my time was kind of spent in like, all right, so you're drinking too much. Well, that's obvious. Let's get that. Oh, you're 40 pounds overweight. Well, that's obvious. You're eating like shit and you're not taking care of yourself. So my signs were kind of the negative blaring ones. But I think to your point, there's so many families, and I'm 45 years old, so I've got a lot of friends that have kids now that are in their teenage years, that are in high school or middle school, and there's a lot of people in their 40s and 30s that every day, all day, it's just get up, work, take care of the kids, take the kids to sports, do the kids' homework. There's absolutely no time for yourselves, and then they feel guilty about going to yoga for an hour, or the guy feels guilty about playing golf on the weekends, or And this isn't about skirting your responsibilities. This isn't saying like putting your whatever, just like your desires over your family. But if you can't take the time to work out your own shit to be the best person you can be, you can't be the best dad or the best husband or the best employee or employer. And that's that's where I think a lot of people get into this rat race, and it's so easy to get into where it's just more material shit and keeping up with the Joneses and just this constant pull away from your own genuine time. And especially now with cell phones and everybody's just stuck to the screen, where so much value can be had by just a walk in the woods with no one, by yourself, with just quiet. And then you start really realizing the sounds of the birds and the wind and the leaves underneath your feet and that connection, and this is, you do that for years, well, weeks and then months and then years, and you start adding in yoga and then Monroe and then lucid dreaming and then maybe some plant-based medicines, maybe a retreat. And the the physiological effect of just having your body run in its like natural good flowing state is just physically feels so amazing. So I think once people like actually feel that, and I know I didn't really feel that for my first time in my adult life until all of this, it's like you realize that yes, this is a better way when every physical function. I mean, you're sleeping better, you're metabolizing food better, you have more energy. You're not yelling at everybody, having road rage. You're not screaming at people in the market because the line's going too short or lasting too long. All of these things where you realize like, oh shit, I can comment on the cute little kid's button, and I can talk to this veteran over here, and I can comment on, I don't know, like just you stop just being so pent up. And again, maybe I'm speaking, this is my experience. I was that guy, but I tell you, there's so many people I know that they wake up and they watch the morning news and they're bitching at the TV and they're yelling at the news. And then they read the paper and everything in the paper is shit and they're yelling at that. And then on the way to work, everybody's an asshole. Everybody at work's an asshole. They get home and and I've kind of been on this rant kind of saying it like this, but it's like it's true because I've seen it where people are complaining about making dinner, then cooking dinner, then cleaning dinner, and then it's like what the fuck? You just spent all day miserable, all day complaining, all day not whatever, where I go to bed with prayers of gratitude, prayers of thankfulness. I wake up in this state of just elated bliss and contentment and joy. And I'm not saying that again in some corny like way, or I'm not trying to make it sound better than it really is. I really wake up every day just excited to know whatever that experience may be, knowing that there may be some kinks in it, knowing that there may be some course corrections, but those will be opportunities for me to grow, or maybe a course correction is really needed. But literally all day is spent like humming, singing, dancing. Right now I'm landscaping, which is the least glorious job I've ever had as an adult. But all day looking at insects and I'm smelling flowers and looking at when I weed whack the grass and it throws out a small droplet of water and it has a rainbow prism in the morning. Like I'm not sitting there being like, oh, what the fuck, I'm weed whacking. I'm looking at rainbow prisms and the butterfly and the hummingbird and the smell of cedar. And it's like, oh, I get to do this all day. Where, again, a couple of years ago, I would have been like, what the hell am I doing weed whacking for a living? And it's just, I'm in this transition step where now I don't quite know how I can fit back into society or this matrix or whatever, but I know it's not the rat race. I know it's not working 70, 80 hours a week. I know it's not just whatever, like getting more bills to pay more bills, to have more shit, to throw away more shit, to get more shit, to then have to earn more shit. And a simple life is way better. And that's not, I want to not demonize alcohol or demonize success or demonize financial security. It was my relationship in the past to all of those things that was skewed. And now I think hopefully I have a proper relationship with all of those things. But yeah, now but I'm comfortable. That's where that kind of, I don't, not to say I don't care what happens, but I know I won't ever go back to drinking. I know I won't ever yell at another woman and scream anything in her face. I know I won't ever threaten to kill a man unless, God forbid, it's like really needed, not over $100 for sure. There's just certain things I know not to do and never to do again. And certainly, um, once you start feeling plaque being built back up, or the life gives you those indicator lights, where before I used to just numb them with a 6-pack of IPA and whatever, just numb it. Now I say thank you to the universe for giving me that indicator light. What is this indicator light saying? And let's address it. And then after it's addressed, you have a better understanding of yourself. It's no longer an indicator light. Everybody's happy. You avoided conflict. And those are the type of things that you stop compiling weeks after months after years like that. And I guess ultimately that's the story I'm trying to sell or share. Not, hey, go blast off on shrooms or DMT, or if your life's going to shit, there's this easy magic pill. It's really not. It's listen to your intuition, listen to your gut, and if you're getting signs and signals from the universe saying something's going to change, then change it before it's too late, like I did, where I lost everything. And now I'm saying how, and my life is amazing, but the truth is I'm digging a very, very big hole that I made that, you know maybe in retrospect I didn't have to dig that deep of a hole. While other people don't have to explode the way I did. They can kind of internalize some of that energy and do good with it.
Mm. So tell us about your experiences at the Monroe Institute, because the work of Robert Monroe is really kind of what led me down this whole path with this channel. His books, uh, well, Ultimate Journey was probably the one that really stands out, but Journeys Out of the Body was the first one. And I've had the CEO of the Monroe Institute on the channel once, so I've got this fascination with the work that they do. So tell me how that you got led to them and what you did there.
So similar to how I mentioned DMT kind of came into my life, Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute, within a matter of like 3 or 4 weeks, just seemed to get brought up by so many people. And I was like, all right, well, obviously this is a signal and a sign, so let me look into it. And the more that I explored his own personal experiences and then what they were doing at the Monroe Institute, it sounded very, very similar to my experiences with DMT, which was elevated states of consciousness, catalyzed or you know induced by different states of vibratory hum. And that is a very common, or very not common, it is part of a DMT session. Like your body does vibrate and hum, and there is this shaking that happens, and it is frequency, it is vibration. And for anybody that isn't aware of the basics of how the Monroe Institute technology works, is they use binaural beats, and basically they're putting different frequencies of sound into each hemisphere. So each left and right ear is getting a different frequency. The difference of that is what your brain registers. So they're able to basically have your brain register frequencies that are way lower than we normally can react to. So the premise is, with certain frequencies, you can induce states that will allow deeper meditation or separation of your physical and mental body. You can, this may give you a better chance to astral project or have an out of body experience. They were claiming that these different vibratory hums would allow you to do different things. And truthfully, my intent going there was to compare their stories of what they could do with what I was already experiencing in my DMT states. And, was there any correlation, and was there any similarities? So, and to answer your statement about you'd like to go, if you ever get the chance to go to the Monroe Institute in Virginia, that campus is absolutely amazing. It's in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Amazing people, amazing staff. And I'm not being paid to say this. It was worth every penny, and primarily because it's taking a week for yourself. Phones and computers are away, and you're doing 6, 7 to 8 hours of deep meditation a day with their binaural beats. But I'd probably, even without their binaural beats and the hemisync program, you would probably have a profound experience, because you're just taking the time to explore your consciousness like that. But long story short, they have several focus levels. So focus level 12, 15, 21, and all of those correlate to a different frequency that, in addition to kind of like a guided and prompted meditation, they train you on kind of saying, all right, now we're going to stop pulsing this in, and ultimately you may, ideally you're going to start having these different feelings. My skepticism the first day was, are you going to know instantly, like viscerally, when you're playing these frequencies? Is this just some kind of like mind mess thing where we're all just kind of being hypnotized and we're all just like, oh yeah, uh it really was. As soon as you put on those things, the headphones, and they started playing their different focus levels, your body changed like you had no control over it. There was clearly something happening. And then in those elevated different states of vibrating, um, it was kind of like as a radio station, or excuse me, as a radio player, they were increasing the sensitivity of your antenna, and they were allowing more information and more things to come in. And that experience was very real. That it was also similar to, I think, the different levels of kind of states of DMT that you can get into. Um, and there were a lot of other similarities. Some of the basics, just you realize, or you not realize, you remember that you are way more than just your physical body. So that's actually their slogan. You're more than your physical body. In the DMT space, you instantly know that, and that's not a question. You are way more than just this physical kind of meat suit. Um, you know, I actually wrote a paper where I outlined some of the similarities, but even just things like, that you're not alone. Not only in this human sense, but in this other kind of ethereal, unconscious world. There's definitely things out there, and there's definitely beings. And part of what got me interested in that, going to the Monroe, was the gateway, like the CIA gateway kind of connection to the Monroe, where they were claiming, well, not claiming, CIA had pumped like millions of dollars into their programs, and they were getting like really good responses, and their remote viewers were going and getting like actual intelligence from all sorts of crazy stuff, like Russian subs and um, really kind of profound stuff. There was a government paper that was produced, and again, like through the government, okayed, and they were talking about non-corporeal beings. So basically that means like non-physical, like something beyond just a physical state. So here's this CIA backed paper who's saying that they did prove in their minds non-corporeal beings. Again, so that kind of jived with what I was seeing in these DMT entities. So there were several data points where I took it upon myself that I decided this is worth me investing in myself. This is worth taking the time to save up to go there. And um, yeah, I went with that intention. I want to stress this too, I didn't bring any psychedelics there. I didn't combine DMT when I was there doing their programs. I went completely psychedelic free, and came out of that experience with just such a better understanding of myself, a better understanding of what the psychedelics had showed me, increased sensitivity to most of my five senses, but then an increased awareness of the other layers of my body. And then an important part of it, and I don't know what CEO you had, was it Alan? Was it the woman?
Yes. Yep.
So she was actually there the week that I was there doing the program that I was with. So I became friends with her. And then Robert Monroe's stepdaughter, this lady Penny, she's this amazing woman who she was a teacher. So she was my teacher there as well. So it was Alan and this lady Penny who's telling stories of like sitting around Robert Monroe's dinner table. And then 24 other people. After every meditation, there was a debrief, and then we'd have these amazing meals. But the sum of that was the collective and cohesiveness of that group, and the benefit that we all were able to share by being raw and being authentic and kind of letting our guard down. I'm still friends in contact with majority of those 25 people. Several of those people have had major impacts in my life. Actually, it's just coming up on a year since I've been there, and it's just way greater than the sum of its parts, and the synergistic effect of their program, the power and energy of the people around you. If you have, and similar to psychedelics, what's your intent? What's the environment? What is, if you're going there as a naysayer and you're trying to disprove something, or if you're going there saying, I need to have a near death experience, or otherwise it's bullshit, or I need to remote view, or this doesn't work, then that place isn't for you. If you're going there to say, I want to explore my consciousness and to try to understand different aspects on how to tap into it in a group that's going to not judge you, and like, yeah. So it was something that introduced me to just that whole aspect of adult learning, I guess, continued education in a setting where there's no judgment. Everybody's really trying to help each other grow, and I just found it really beneficial on a lot of different levels, especially for somebody that was that dark loner that was walking around just wanting nothing to do with myself, but also nothing to do with anybody. To leave that where we're all hugging and crying and snot dripping down our nose, being like telling everybody we love one another. And I still, like I said, to this day, I speak with several of them on a weekly basis, and have continued to have major, really important conversations with them. So it's, but I think it's one of several modalities, and I think people like Robert Monroe and the staff and crew around him, including like Tom Campbell and the people that have kind of expanded off of him, are exactly what needs to continue happening. I'm hoping I'm contributing, a small part of that. I'm My inner circle now is with a lot of kind of cool consciousness explorers, whether it be psychedelic based or not. And I think there's a lot there that and as a current society, we're missing. And there's a lot of some of these older ancient practices, whether it be some of the, and this is kind of, um, one of my areas that I love going down is like the older ancient esoteric knowledge and these ancient wisdom teachings, where a lot of them talk about the power of going within and, facing your inner demons, or going into that proverbial or literal cave of darkness for several days to, kind of have that inner death, so that way you can truly live. And there's something there's something to that. And that, again, it's not just my story. It's something that's been told for thousands and thousands of years, of once you kind of have that burning down of everything, and you finally confront all of your inner demons and all your shit, and you finally say, and we've already dropped a couple swears, hopefully I don't get you banned on YouTube, but my
So
first chapter in my book is, who the fuck am I? And it's because it was said with that passion, where I was pleading to the universe. And I think there's I think we need that in society, for people to truly and want to know and authentically ask that question, who the fuck am I? And it's not going to be found in looking at your phone or through social media, or trying to keep up with the Joneses, or try to be like somebody else. It's going to be found by being truly your unique self, figuring out how you're comfortable in your own skin, and exploring your tethered and untethered consciousness. Because I think that's a big part of it too, is it's not go off in these elevated, enlightened states, find your alien planet and ascend to the 5D and just, all right, leave all this. I think it's the opposite. You go into these elevated states, you learn the lessons, and then you bring them back into this 3D. You bring it back into this, this human suit, and you apply it in a practical way that benefits you and society.
so you pretty much answered the question that I was going to wrap it up and try and pull everything together. So you've, after all this experience that you've had, through DMT and other psychedelics and at the Monroe Institute, how is your view of what consciousness is transformed, and why do you think it is that we're here in these fragile human bodies?
So, what is consciousness, and why are we here in the bodies? All right, wrap that up in 3 minutes. Um, so I
Wait, take five if you need to.
there's I think there's a couple ways of looking at consciousness. One of the kind of OG psychonauts, or somebody's book that's referenced quite a bit, is Aldous Huxley in the Doors of Perception, and he kind of talks about consciousness as that it's like a reducing valve, that our human body, including our mind, um, has to basically reduce so much of the electromagnetic, as well as all of the other spectrums of energies that we don't know or can't name, in order just to survive. So our five senses are very limited on what they're able to take in, and rightly so. It's what keeps us able to survive and able to not go nuts. I think what psychedelics do, I think what fasting could do, breathing meditations could do, cold plunges can do, all of these, like I said, I think there's several modalities, but they allow they allow your body to vibrate and um, get information at, like I said, different information than you normally would. So what I think is happening is that when we do these modalities, we're just expanding our antenna. We're opening up that reducing valve, and we're as just a normal human, we're taking in such a small aspect of it. That's why in a lot of these trip reports, especially in Rick Strassman's book, they talk about more real than real. And I think it's because if you have a 7 minute experience in a normal walking state, say you have 100 data points. If you do that in a DMT state, you're going to have 100,000 data points, because there's just so much stuff coming in. And that's why you come back from that saying that there is more, that there is something other beyond. So part of the answer of that consciousness is, I think it's energy, it's information, it's something that anything we try to name it is going to dumb it down. but it's something that and it ties in our human body. It's something that we're able as a vessel to communicate and resonate with. And I think that's the term, is resonate. So how do we, as our eyes resonate with certain light frequencies, we see colors and we can see motion. As our ears resonate with certain frequencies, we hear sounds and certain beats. I think there's so many other senses that humans have that we don't normally talk about. And it's just learning to refine those, find them, refine them, appreciate them, and then realize that they're actually there and they're real, and you're not crazy for seeing ghosts or talking to spirits or downloading information from the Akashic records or talking to your future self or your past self, or all of these kind of claims that a lot of your guests have talked about. And I think it's all just, we're all trying to describe what we're experiencing, which is, holy shit, we're way more than this physical body. And once you kind of realize that, taste it, experience it, um, you realize that consciousness is way greater than what is contained in our body, and our body can be so much greater than what we typically think it is. And that's just like this swirling thing where they both keep interacting with one another. So I'm not quite sure there's even that much of a separation. I think we're all just different states of energy and information, and it's a constant flow and dynamic thing. I don't
All
know.
right, so that's a good answer for
Uh,
consciousness. And the other part to my question was, why do you think we are here having this experience in these bodies? Why would we take that seems like vast, expansive awareness and bring it down into that reducing valve? Why do you think we do that?
the happy, shiny answer is, I say that we're all part of this consciousness, or we're all part of source, and we're all kind of this unique, shiny, iridescent facet of this gem. And um, maybe the more iridescence, the more facets, the more way for this consciousness to experience itself. And I know that the real kind of, if I could boil down my life into some of the most important things, it's when it's the most emotionally tense, or there's it's a point where my human body is being the most human, whether that be good or bad. And the, like I said, the happy way of saying it is, maybe we're all just this extension of this big, massive kind of super organism that is all just trying to get more data points in. Um, you know, I, there's people talking about that it's just a simulation in a matrix, and humans are just this loosh for energy, and we're being farmed. I don't I don't I don't see that, because I've never seen it. I haven't come across anything nefarious, or, and I hope this isn't, I'm not trying to sound naive to say that there's not bad or evil. Uh, I just, I think it's more of an experiential thing. And with the more and more levels of experience or consciousness or layers or deeper that I get, I think it's more, my my true thing is that, well, my true belief is that I think humans can just keep elevating and evolving and increasing their five senses. And then once we realize that there's seven, and then 10 and 12, and then hopefully, in the future, now we're talking about human and the whatever 182 senses, and those are still expanding. I'm hoping that the more we realize just how amazing this body can be, and maybe that's unlocking the parts of our DNA that isn't working. Maybe that's the glial cells in our brain instead of the synapses. Maybe that's the microtubules, where there's people are talking about quantum exchange of information. I don't know how all of it happens. I just know that we're when I look into the mirror, it's way more than just what's being told in textbooks or what society wants people to experience. It's the novel thinkers like the Robert Monroes, the Tom Campbells, um, from the psychedelic standpoint, like the Terrence McKennas and the people that blaze those trails, the Rick Strassmans, that are saying there's more to this. And it can be tied to religion, it can be tied to spirituality, it can be tied to psychedelics, but it has to, in my opinion, be an internal, inner exploration of who you are. And again, that's going to be different for everybody, but that's the beauty, is it's not a one size fits all. It's not do this like he did it, or do this like she did it, or you need this near death experience, or you need to have this massive trauma as a kid. No, it's going to be listen to your own intuition, but in order to listen, you may have to go find a quiet place. And that's probably the biggest challenge in today's society, is telling yourself you're worth it, and then telling your family, friends, and whatever work that, yeah, I'm out for a week because I need to go sit by myself. But I think that's the first step in this whole process.
Adam, this has been a great conversation. I've got to wrap it up, but we'll put some links to your book and your website and how people can get in
Appreciate it.
touch with you. Uh, it's been a
Can I,
way more interesting conversation. Yeah, sorry, go
I was,
ahead.
if I could make an offer, because I've done a couple podcasts in Australia, and I've made this offer, and I've gotten an amazing response back from it. But um, I'd really like to share the message, not necessarily sell any books, as much as I enjoy selling the books. But if anybody wants a free PDF copy, I'd be more than happy to send a PDF copy to anybody that wants it. My email address is booksbyadambutler@gmail.com. And again, if my words can help somebody, or if just hearing one aspect of my story could potentially shine a little bit of light on somebody, to me, that's well worth an email. So if anybody is interested in the book, I'd be more than happy to send you a copy.
All right, that's amazing. We'll put that address in the show notes as well. Adam, thanks again for being here today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. I look forward to watching more of your content. Thank you.